It's 7:23 a.m., June 18, 1944. Outside Cotentin, France, Sergeant Jacob Mertens peers nervously from a third-floor window of a half-ruined farmhouse. His MG-42 rattles as he scans the fields below. In the last hour, 6 of his men have fallen to American fire. He believes he's untouchable. After all, machine gun nests dominate the field and the Germans hold the high ground. Yet 3 miles away, hidden inside a forgotten concrete grain silo, a lone figure sits motionless. Technical Sergeant Raymond Ray Kuzlowski, a Wisconsin dairy farmer turned sniper, watches through a narrow ventilation slot. The air inside is stale. The concrete walls radiate the heat of the early summer sun, and a bucket sits silently in the corner, his only concession to human needs. Ray has been here for 11 hours, with no food, no water, no sound. His Springfield M1903 A4 rifle rests on sandbags, perfectly leveled, every shot calculated. Through the tiny slit, he can see the entire German defensive line. 37 positions, 14 officers marked by insignia and behavior. In the next minute, Sergeant Mertens will be dead. Not by artillery, not by a hail of bullets from open fields, but from a place no one considered tactical, a farmer's silo. This is the story of how a quiet Wisconsin farm boy changed the course of a battle, killed 28 enemy officers, and saved hundreds of American lives through ingenuity, patience, and observation. Ray Kuzlowski was born in 1919 in Sheboygan County, Wisconsin, the second of 5 sons in a family that farmed 80 acres of dairy land. Life on the farm was unforgiving. Days began before sunrise, ended long after sunset, and required constant attention to animals, machinery, and fields. As the second son, Ray inherited the tasks nobody else wanted. His older brother milked cows in pre-dawn darkness, but Ray cleaned stalls, repaired broken fences, and climbed silos to break up clogged grain, a task so hated it was passed to him without question. 40 feet up a rusted ladder, with dust and grain swirling around, he learned balance, patience, and calculation, lessons that would later save lives. Ray's rifle skills developed almost accidentally. At 13, his uncle hired him to shoot groundhogs, pests that dug dangerous holes where cattle could injure themselves. Ray lined up shots at 200 yards, calculating wind and distance. By 15, he'd won the state youth shooting competition, earning a trophy his mother displayed proudly. His father, ever practical, said, "That's fine, but the cows still need milking." The combination of farm toil and precise shooting shaped Ray. The silent hours alone in silos, the need for patience, the attention to detail, and the calculated precision of every shot prepared him for something he could never have imagined: modern warfare. By 1941, Europe was engulfed in chaos. France had fallen. The skies above Britain were filled with enemy aircraft, cities in ruins. Across the Atlantic, America watched warily, still neutral, but aware about the conflict could eventually reach its shores. Ray was initially exempt from service. Farmers were essential to the war effort, and his father needed him at home. Yet the news weighed heavily. Letters arrived from cousins who had enlisted, filled with bravado, hope, and eventually sorrow. One cousin returned home in a flag-draped coffin by spring 1942. Ray could not ignore the call any longer. In October 1942, Ray walked into the recruiting office in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, a mix of determination and fear in his chest. His father did not speak to him for 2 weeks, a silent punishment heavier than any drill instructor's voice.
At Camp McCoy, Ray's skill was immediately obvious. Every shot struck dead center. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" instructors asked. "Groundhogs," Ray replied. Ray was sent to sniper school at Fort Benning, where he honed his skills in precision, stealth, and patience. He graduated second in his class, but rankings were irrelevant to him. What mattered was application, the ability to save lives with skill and calculation. By April 1944, he was in England with the 82nd Airborne Division, assigned as a designated marksman. Unlike most snipers who preferred partners, Ray worked alone. Years in silos had taught him to thrive in solitude, to observe quietly, and to act decisively when needed. June 13, 1944. The 82nd Airborne pushed toward Cotentin, France. German snipers dominated the terrain. Machine gun nests commanded the fields. Mortar teams provided overlapping support. Every officer, radio operator, and squad leader was a target. By the third day, 11 American soldiers had been killed by sniper fire, including men Ray knew. Conventional tactics failed. Ground-level patrols and artillery suppression were ineffective. The Germans had elevation, concealment, and patience, and they used it to deadly effect. Ray knew that to save lives, brute force would not suffice. He would have to innovate. At dawn, Ray walked the fields. The Norman countryside stretched before him. Small hedges, scattered farms, churches, barns, and abandoned grain silos. Dozens of them, 30 to 40 feet tall. Where others saw irrelevant farm equipment, Ray saw opportunity. Silos were invisible command posts, overlooked, untouchable, and perfect for observation. His childhood in them gave him unique insight. He knew how the angles worked, where shadows fell, and how to move silently. One silo stood out, a concrete cylinder 38 feet tall, with a narrow hatch, walls 3 feet thick, and ventilation slots every 10 feet. From here, Ray could see 3 miles of German territory. On June 16th, Ray prepared meticulously. He climbed the silo, noting the angle of fire. Ventilation slots were too narrow. He widened them with tin snips, carefully avoiding noise. Sandbags became a rifle rest. Food, water, and a bucket were arranged for a days-long siege. Hours turned into days. Stillness became a weapon. Patience, learned from hours alone in silos on his father's farm, became his greatest asset. By June 17th, Ray had mapped German positions, calculated bullet drop, and mentally rehearsed every shot.
Gray light crept over the Norman fields. Through the narrow ventilation slot of the silo, Ray's eyes swept the landscape. Every hedge, every crossroads, every farmhouse, every barn, mapped in his mind. 37 German positions, 14 officers, marked by insignia, posture, and careful observation. Ray's heart beat steadily. Each breath was deliberate. His Springfield M1903A4 rested on the sandbags he had meticulously arranged the night before. Every round was precious. A single mistake could expose him. For hours, he sat still. Minutes felt like eternity. He watched as the world slowly awakened. French farmers long gone, crows taking flight, the morning mist curling over hedgerows, then movement. At 6:12 a.m., a German officer stepped from a farmhouse, binoculars in hand, surveying the American lines. Ray observed silently, taking mental notes: path, gestures, timing, and likely escape routes. The man wasn't his primary target, but he would later provide critical intelligence on troop patterns. Ray waited. Every muscle coiled. Time slowed. Then, at 6:58 a.m., Lieutenant Klaus Becker emerged. Ray had learned of Becker's reputation: aggressive, competent, responsible for multiple American deaths. He moved with purpose, officer's cap firmly in place, binoculars lifted to his eyes. Ray adjusted his scope. 820 yards. Wind, 3 to 5 miles per hour. Left to right. Angle, 42 degrees down. Breath, halfway in. Exhale, halfway out. The Springfield fired. The concrete walls echoed the shot like thunder. Becker collapsed instantly, clutching his chest. Soldiers rushed to him. Too late.
Ray exhaled, reloaded, and prepared for the next. German soldiers scattered. Some dived behind walls, others dashed between buildings. Sergeant Mertens appeared in the third-floor window of a farmhouse, shouting orders. Ray tracked him. Another shot. Another officer gone. By mid-morning, panic had spread. Commanders hesitated. Orders went unheeded. Radios crackled in confusion. Soldiers were left without guidance. Ray did not celebrate. There was no glory here, only duty. Each officer down meant fewer American lives lost, and every disruption multiplied the effectiveness of the advancing 82nd Airborne. The stillness of the silo allowed Ray to reflect. He thought of Eddie Kowalski, James Devlin, Marcus Freeman, friends killed by unseen German snipers. Their faces haunted him. Every shot he fired now carried both vengeance and protection. He remembered his youth, hours in silos, hands coated with dust, watching the grain shift, learning patience, learning observation. The skill that seemed mundane now became a weapon. The quiet solitude of farm life had transformed into lethal precision under extreme pressure. By late morning, rumors of the invisible sniper reached German ears. Patrols scoured the countryside. Farmers questioned. Homes searched. Yet nobody thought to look up at the silos. Ray observed every movement. He tracked soldiers darting between cover, officers issuing whispered orders, radios spitting garbled instructions. Morale crumbled, leadership faltered, command structures broke. American infantry moved more freely, suffering fewer casualties. He adjusted his strategy. Not every officer needed to be shot immediately. Priority targets, those directing fire, those leading from the front, those coordinating multiple positions. Timing and patience were crucial. Ray's use of silos demonstrated the power of unconventional thinking. Elevation, concealment, and patience, tools any farmer understood, became a force multiplier. He rotated positions within the silo, maintaining a low profile, conserving energy. Ventilation slots provided cover from observation. Every shot accounted for distance, wind, bullet drop, and angle. By the end of the first day, several officers were gone, and chaos ruled German lines. Infantry reports noted fewer ambushes, more captured positions, and drastically reduced casualties. Ray's tactics were unorthodox, but effective. For the next 3 days, Ray remained in the silo. Sleep was minimal, water and rations carefully measured. He rotated, adjusted his scope, recalibrated holdovers. He fired only at officers, never wasting ammunition on soldiers with no command role. By June 21, he had killed 28 officers. German units, stripped of leadership, floundered. Orders were delayed or ignored. Units hesitated under fire, unsure who to obey. The chaos allowed American forces to advance rapidly and with minimal resistance. Ray was not immune to the mental burden. Alone in the silo, he visualized the men he had killed. Faces, fleeting glances, expressions of surprise, fear, and panic, etched in his mind. Hours stretched into days. Heat from the sun, cold at night. Rations were minimal. Every movement could be fatal. Yet he remained calm. Patience and observation, the same skills honed on his family farm, were now tested under the most extreme circumstances imaginable. Ray's success did not end with the battlefield. American commanders noticed a sharp reduction in infantry casualties. Snipers elsewhere began experimenting with elevated positions. Silo usage became an informal tactic spreading rapidly through the theater of operations. His innovation emphasized thinking beyond standard military doctrine. Elevation, using overlooked height to dominate terrain. Concealment, exploiting locations considered irrelevant by enemy forces. Patience, hours, sometimes days, spent in stillness to achieve maximum effect. Precision, every movement, every shot, calculated for lethal efficiency. Ray had turned an ordinary structure, a farm silo, into a game-changing tactical advantage, and in doing so had rewritten part of sniper warfare history. By the evening of June 21, 1944, Ray had spent nearly 4 continuous days inside the concrete cylinder. His muscles cramped from awkward angles, knees sore from leaning on sandbags, and stomach empty except for ration bars. Water had been carefully rationed, and the bucket, a small mercy, was emptied only once. Ray knew the Germans would search the area at first light. One misstep could trap him in the silo, or worse, reveal him to enemy patrols. Darkness became his ally. Slowly, deliberately, he dismantled his firing position. Sandbags rolled. The Springfield scope was detached, carefully packed, ammunition secured. Every movement minimized to reduce noise. The climb out was the most dangerous part. 38 feet of rusted steel ladder, vertical and precarious. Sweat and grime made his grip slippery. One misstep meant instant death. Inch by inch he ascended, careful with every rung. The weight of the rifle and gear pulled at him, but he moved steadily. The familiar smell of dust, grain, and rust filled his senses. At the top he tested the hatch. Metal creaked. One gentle push. Silence. He slipped out, dropped to the ground. Darkness enveloped him. Every shadow could conceal a German patrol. Using hedgerows and tree lines, he melted into the terrain. By 11:45 p.m., he rejoined Allied lines, unseen, undetected. His silo had done its deadly work. The next morning, Ray met with Captain Robert Henshaw. Henshaw's eyes widened as reports came in. Multiple German officers killed, command disrupted, American casualties sharply reduced. Captain Henshaw said, "Ray, how did you do it?" "Worked from a silo, sir," Ray replied. "No embellishment, no theatrics, just facts." Henshaw studied him, impressed but cautious. "You realize this isn't standard procedure. You could have been court-martialed if caught." Ray shrugged. "It worked." That was enough recognition. The war had no place for ego. Results mattered, lives mattered. In 1945, Ray returned to Shobin County, Wisconsin. The war had changed him, though he rarely spoke of it. He married, raised a family, and returned to the rhythms of farm life. Silos, Springfield, and the battlefield became memories tucked away quietly in his mind. Neighbors knew him as a hard-working, reliable man, tending cattle and fixing machinery. Few knew the full extent of what he had done in Normandy. He was just Ray the farmer, blending into a community that valued quiet diligence over heroics. Years later, military historians sought him out. In 1991, one tracked him down for an interview, hoping to uncover the methods behind the legendary silo sniper. Ray agreed to speak, though cautiously. For 3 hours, he recounted childhood days climbing silos, the lessons of patience learned from farm chores, and the calculated choices made during the Normandy campaign. He spoke without dramatics, weaving memories of grain dust, sun on concrete, and the smell of fermented corn with the calculated logic of a marksman. When asked if he had any regrets, Ray paused. "War is war," he said. "I did what I had to. Every shot was meant to protect the men around me. That's all I ever wanted. Medal, Recognition? That doesn't matter. Seeing my boys safe, that's enough. The historian took notes furiously. Ray's tactics had already reshaped sniper doctrine, emphasizing observation, elevation, and the use of overlooked terrain. His success demonstrated that battlefield innovation often comes from the most ordinary places. A farm silo, invisible to strategists and overlooked by soldiers, had become a tactical multiplier. Ray had turned rural infrastructure into a weapon, using common sense, observation, and patience.
Though a tactical genius, Ray remained humble. He never sought fame or accolades. Letters arrived decades later from soldiers thanking him indirectly, unaware of the man who had saved their lives. For Ray, the silos were an extension of a life he had always known: quiet work, solitary observation, and attention to detail. The same skills that kept cows safe and crops thriving now saved hundreds of lives on the battlefield. In retirement, he would walk the fields near his farm. Children of neighbors played nearby. Birds nested in the same silos he once used. He looked up, remembering June 1944, reflecting quietly. Ordinary skills, extraordinary consequences. The innovation's broader impact. Ray's approach influenced sniper tactics across the European theater. Elevated positions, overlooked structures, and patient observation became key lessons in sniper training. By the end of World War II, military manuals included guidance inspired directly by Ray's actions. Selecting unconventional sniper positions, observing enemy behavior over extended periods, prioritizing high-value targets for strategic disruption. American forces began experimenting with silos, church steeples, and water towers. The concept of terrain as weapon entered doctrine. The quiet Wisconsin farmer had inadvertently rewritten sniper tactics for generations. Ray never glorified his actions. To him, it was all logic. People would die if he didn't act. It was simple math, combined with childhood lessons in patience and observation. Skill and preparation save lives, he would later say to his children. Courage is knowing you're scared and still doing what's necessary. Though medals never came, recognition did in other ways. The respect of fellow snipers, the improved survival of American soldiers, and the legacy of tactical innovation he left behind. Ray Kuzlowski's story proves that innovation often arises from ordinary experience applied in extraordinary situations. A farmer's knowledge of silos became a weapon of war. A boy who shot groundhogs learned skills that would save hundreds of lives. The story reminds us that strategic genius doesn't always come from generals or formal training. Sometimes it comes from observation, creativity, and relentless patience, the kind taught in fields, silos, and homes. Ray's legacy lives on in military manuals, sniper training, and the countless lives saved because he thought differently. The silo sniper was not just a marksman, he was a master of terrain, psychology, and timing. A simple man who changed history through ingenuity, quiet courage, and patience. He once said simply, "I didn't want glory. I wanted men to survive. That's all that mattered." And in that simple principle, his greatness resides.